All right, we're back on the record. A few more questions here, Mr. Floyd.
In August of 2020, the city of Vallejo, California, hired a retired sheriff with nearly 3 decades of law enforcement experience to investigate claims that members of its police force bent the tips of their star-shaped badges following an on-duty shooting. The badge-bending revelations made national news.
New at 11, disturbing allegations against members of the Vallejo Police Department that they had a tradition of officers bending their badges as a way to mark people they had killed. The police chief
and Vallejo's police chief promptly confirmed through 2 sources inside the department that the morbid practice had been part of the department's history.
Celebrating the killing of a human being is never acceptable, and I'm deeply disturbed by these allegations. I'm doing an official inquiry into the department and the allegations. The inquiry helps me to understand the culture of the department in a greater way and to take corrective actions.
Over the next year, retired Sonoma County Sheriff turned private investigator Robert Giordano interviewed past and present Vallejo police officers who were suspected of bending their badges after they'd been involved in a shooting. Giordano's investigation, however, wasn't that thorough because he didn't bother to check most officers' badges or with the company that would have fixed or replaced them.
Reality is, it's so easy to fix the badge, nobody's going to appreciate that badge. So it became inspecting what they have just to say there were no bent badges. It lost its value. Right. So it became less relevant.
Despite Giordano completing his 150-page report in September of 2021, it remains under lock and key as the city's attorneys argue it's a personnel matter and therefore shielded from even newly loosened state disclosure laws. But one public defender in Solano County is conducting his own investigation as part of his defense of a Fremont man who survived being shot in the head by Vallejo police following a vehicle chase that ended outside a school in East Oakland.
Shots fired, officers okay, shots fired, 22nd half.
The court hearings for the defense of Dominic Milano have revealed, for the first time, specific details about who has been bending whose badge following shootings, a practice that has gone on for nearly 2 decades that the city continues to try and keep secret. According to that testimony, badge bending among the ranks of the Vallejo Police Department started in 2003 with an officer, Michael Tribble, who prefers to go by his middle name Kent, and who came over from the Concord Police Department with his brother Todd. In Vallejo, Todd Tribble would wear badge number 587 and rise to the rank of captain, while Kent Tribble would wear badge number 588 and make lieutenant.
He said, don't say anything about this to anybody else, and me and my brother are the only ones who can bend someone's badge.
So it was a positive.
I'm Brian Kranz. I'm a reporter with the Vallejo Sun. In this podcast, we're going to hear how one of Vallejo Police's lesser discussed shootings is unraveling the department's history of commemorating police shootings, with involved officers allegedly having the tips of their badges bent, potentially incentivizing officers to shoot, creating an overall violent police culture propped up by a command staff and district attorney's office that routinely clears officers of any wrongdoing. And we're also going to name those officers directly involved.
The shootings were being investigated by the guys who had bent badges and who were sometimes bending their badges before they'd even finished investigating the shooting. I mean, you know.
Go back to the scene, AC, that shots fired. Go back to the scene.
Let's keep this momentum going.
In the early afternoon of November 1st, 2018, a resident of Vallejo's affluent Glen Cove neighborhood alerted a Vallejo police officer of an armed man sitting in a car. That man was Dominic Milano, a convicted felon who witnesses would later testify in court had a large stash of guns in his possession, including assault rifles and fully automatic weapons.
You should have fucking rammed it, dude. Shit!
Soon, Milano and Vallejo police officer Matthew Komoda, badge number 665, and others were in a high-speed chase reaching 120 miles an hour down Interstate 80. Other Vallejo officers followed as Milano led them into Alameda County and into Oakland. Milano allegedly fired at officers, crashing his SUV into a pole at International Boulevard and 22nd Avenue, where he allegedly exchanged gunfire with the pursuing Vallejo officers. Body camera footage of the incident shows Milano wearing body armor and carrying an assault-style rifle.
He shot at us with an AR. Assault rifle. He's an assault rifle.
He's got a rifle in his lap.
And Vallejo officers firing back towards the northeast corner of the Community School for Creative Education, a K-8 school in session that Thursday afternoon.
Better keep both those hands up, my man. All right. I got a shield in my trunk. Get somebody get the shield.
Vallejo police shot Milano several times, including once in the back of the head. Milano was hospitalized and survived. Prosecutors charged him with several felonies weeks later. Milano would be Komoda's third shooting in as many years. Each followed a vehicle pursuit, and two also involved his partner, Officer David Mclaughlin, badge number 664. Facing life in prison if convicted, Milano routinely appears in court wearing a white and black striped Solano County jail prisoner uniform and keeps his head neatly shaved, showing his bullet wound from Vallejo Police. Just like any other criminal defendant, Milano rarely speaks during his court appearances, instead letting his attorneys speak for him.
You're right, Judge. I mean, we are at the point where we have covered this stuff that I think...
Part of the strategy from the Solano County Public Defender's Office in defending Milano is peeling back layers of the revelations that some Vallejo police officers, including Komoda, have celebrated on-duty shootings by bending the tips of their star-shaped badges, possibly offering those officers an incentive to shoot. Deputy Public Defender Nick Folloy argues that being inducted into this secret badge-bending club could help explain why the Vallejo Police Department remains a violent outlier among police departments in the Bay Area and California. Vallejo police have shot and killed 17 men since 2011, and subsequent police misconduct lawsuits have cost the city nearly $13 million in the last decade, with another estimated $50 million in potential liability still outstanding. On March 22nd and 23rd of this year, several current and former Vallejo police officers and members of command staff took this stand to publicly acknowledge and discuss badge bending.
As far as you know, were you the person who brought the tradition of badge bending to Vallejo or started it in Vallejo?
Yes, sir. It was I.
Okay.
One of them was former Vallejo Lieutenant Kent Tribble, badge number 588. Before retiring last year after 18 years as Vallejo Police, Tribble had a reputation for violence that earned him the nickname Captain Taser. On Tuesday, March 22nd, Tribble testified that he came up with the idea to bend an officer's badge after shooting while eating a meal at the Peppermill restaurant as a Concord police officer in the year 2000. Tribble testified that fellow officer Dan Golinvo bent his badge to make Tribble feel better after shooting at a suspect from 7 yards away and missing him.
It was Dan that bent my badge. He was letting me know that he appreciated my efforts, despite how bad I felt about my performance.
Okay.
Back in 2003, Tribble transferred from Concord to the Vallejo Police Department, where he said he continued the badge-bending tradition. One of the badges he apparently bent early on belonged to Officer Sanjay Ramraka, badge number 581.
Hello, I'm Lieutenant Sanjay Ramraka of the Vallejo Police Department. I serve as the department's subject matter expert in force options, tactics, and de-escalation.
Ramraka would later become an internal affairs investigator and is currently heading the department's efforts to reform its use of force policy. Here's Ramraka from a video about the reforms the department released earlier this year, explaining some of the events leading up to needing those reforms.
In August of 2019, the City of Vallejo commissioned the OIR group to conduct an independent assessment of the police department, which came on the heels of fatal officer-involved shootings, strained police-public relationships that prompted public concern and protest. In June of 2020, the Vallejo Police Department entered into a 3-year collaborative reform agreement with the California Department of Justice.
In the video about policy changes, Ramraka says Vallejo Police's policy reflects their values, which he says includes
the sanctity of life, harm reduction, de-escalation, and accountability.
Almost 9 years later to the day, Former Vallejo police officer Joshua Coleman, badge number 611, testified that Tribble bent his badge after shooting 42-year-old William Hines on March 20th, 2013. Coleman said after being interviewed by department detectives, Kent Tribble texted him to come to the Relay Club, a bar across Main Street from Vallejo Police Headquarters. That text message allegedly told Coleman to bring his metal badge with him. When he got to the bar, Coleman found Tribble, along with another officer who shot Heinz, Corporal Dustin Joseph, badge number 585.
So I walked across the street. I walked into the Relay Club, and I found Kent Tribble sitting at a table along with it was a corporal at the time, Dustin Joseph.
Coleman testified that Tribble bent his badge while Joseph watched.
Kent Tribble sat me down, poured me a beer, and then began to tell me about how it would be nice if there was a way that you could recognize people you work with for being people that you could trust in moments of chaos and that you could trust with your life. At which point he asked me for my badge and bent one of the tips on my badge.
Dustin Joseph was one of Vallejo Police's most decorated officers before joining the Fairfield Police Department in 2019. He was also involved in 3 shootings. One of those led to a $2 million settlement when he and Officer Sean Kinney, badge number 620, shot and killed Mario Romero on September 9th, 2012. Kenny would kill 3 people in 5 months that year. At the Relay Club that fatal night in March 2013, Kent Tribble allegedly told Josh Coleman that the only people in Vallejo who could bend someone's badge were he and his brother Todd Tribble, badge number 587, who would eventually be promoted up to captain.
Yes, he continued stating that this was a tradition that he and his brother Todd Tribble started in Concord. He told me that it's less to do with me being in an actual shooting and more to do with the manner in which I conduct myself around the department as a professional.
Coleman is now a Napa County Sheriff's deputy. He didn't want to sit down for an interview with Giordano for his outside investigation into badge bending in Vallejo, but he was compelled to testify in the Milano case because of a subpoena from the Solano County Public Defender's Office. Coleman testified that he was afraid of Kent Tribble, including one incident reminiscent of the movie Training Day. Coleman said when he was a 20-year-old cadet, an elder, Kent Tribble, pulled a gun on him.
The first time that I met Kent Tribble on a ride-along working for the Vallejo Police Department, he put a gun to my head because I didn't put my seatbelt on. And so moving forward in my lifetime with the Vallejo Police Department, I viewed Kent Tribble as a person that I was very afraid of, to be frank. I was 20 years old when that happened.
Coleman testified that he saw Tribble as a reckless person, but also a person he needed on his side if he wanted to advance up the department's ranks.
The entire time working for the city of Vallejo, I viewed Kent Tribble as somebody who was a reckless person, but he was also somebody that people who were higher up in the department respected. And so eventually he became my sergeant.
On July 13th, 2014, Coleman shot 23-year-old Rafael Kalen Martin Jr. Officers had been responding to a report of a man with a gun in the city's country club Crest neighborhood. Martin allegedly fled on foot. Tribble and 3 other officers chased him, but Coleman shot Martin from the window of his patrol car.
That shooting was after that shooting occurred, which was an incredibly stressful moment. I was still in shock, and Kent came up to me, grabbed me by my shoulder, started shaking me in the street, telling me that I stole his dinner, in quotes.
What, you mean that he was stating that you stole dinner, like that should have been his shoot?
Correct.
And that he was angry that you had shot Mr. Martin instead of him?
He was visibly shaking me and almost spitting on my face, telling me that I stole his dinner.
Am I getting the meaning of that right?
Yes.
Okay.
On August 31st, 2016, officers Matthew Komoda and David Mclaughlin were working patrol in Vallejo when they tried to stop a dark Audi SUV for speeding. The vehicle soon came to a stop at a dead-end street. Komoda and Mclaughlin would soon tell investigators that as they were getting out of their car, the Audi started moving in reverse. Fearing they were about to be hit, they fired at the SUV, but neither hit the driver. Tribble testified that after the incident, he bent both Komoda and Mclaughlin's badges at the Relay Club to make them feel better for not shooting the driver of the Audi. About 6 weeks later, on October 16th, 2016, Josh Coleman was involved in his fourth shooting as a Vallejo police officer. That one occurred outside of a Starbucks, where police said 41-year-old Adam Powell had tried to ambush Coleman and Officer Mark Gallios, badge number 652, but Powell's gun malfunctioned. Both Coleman and Gallios shot Powell, who survived and was acquitted at trial. Tribble testified that he bent Coleman's and Gallios' badges after that shooting.
Now, when you indicated that you bent Josh Coleman and Mark Gallios' badge after the Starbucks shooting in South Vallejo,
Yes.
was that a similar situation where you felt they were beating themselves up about their tactical performance?
Not so much that, is that they were pretty shaken, and I don't recall what the time period was between when it occurred and when their badges.
Mm-hmm.
They were really shaken by the fact.
But when it was Coleman's turn to testify, he denied that happened.
No. So if I say to you, you and Mark Gallios got your badges bent after the Starbucks shooting by Kent Tribble, 100% false?
100% false.
Okay.
In late 2016, Tribble was promoted to lieutenant and twice confronted by Captain Lee Horton, badge number 543, about badge bending. Tribble testified the first time Horton told him, quote, "What's wrong with your badge?" And then, quote, "I know what that is, and I don't want to see it," end quote.
So I'm going to go to the first incident when you were confronted by Horton in 2016 about badge bending, or around 2016, not holding necessarily to that year, but sometime that time frame. Did you, after being confronted by him that first time, did you take any action to tell people to fix their badges or to get rid of, correct the tradition of badge bending at the VPD after that first incident?
Not necessarily, no. I was taking them back a little bit. That's all.
It was only after the second time that Horton confronted him that Tribble did anything about badge bending.
So after the second time in 2018, when Horton approached you and you said he was more upset and maybe a more formal conversation, did you take some corrective action with regards to badge bending after that conversation in 2018?
I did. I contacted a few people, I believe it was.
Tribble said that he told officers Matthew Komoda, David Mclaughlin, and Sergeant Jeremy Huff, badge number 586, that they needed to tell others that badge bending was over in the department. But despite his efforts to correct it and saying he wanted to be a better role model, Tribble acknowledged that he also bent his own lieutenant's badge.
When you're talking about maturing and so on and so forth, did you in fact at some point bend your lieutenant badge?
Yes, I did.
And what happened with that?
So, I was having a rough time in that part of my career. I had an incident occur in Bend, Oregon that got highly publicized. Had some personal issues going on.
The incident Tribble referred to happened September 28, 2014. He was drinking with two retired Vallejo police officers, Kevin Coelho and Kevin McCarthy, at a bar in Bend, Oregon. They got into a street fight that night, and witnesses later testified in a Solano County courtroom that Tribble pulled a gun during the fight, more than 450 miles out of his jurisdiction.
The guy in the fucking striped shirt.
And do it again.
Are you a cop? Are you a cop? I just want to know, are you a cop?
We're good.
Are you a cop?
We're good. Fuck you.
That's what I thought.
Fuck you, you little pussy.
No.
In his recent court testimony, Tribble said that the incident in Oregon and other emotional problems he was having led him to bending his lieutenant's badge.
And work seemed to be very adversarial between my command staff and myself. And having had or Captain Portman come in and accuse me of having a bent badge when I didn't, bothered me. It added to some of the things I was already feeling, and I think some of that just conjecture on my part, and probably well deserved based on my incident in Bend, Oregon. But I felt like there was a lot of additional pressure on me and some kind of suspicion. And one night I was at home not dealing with things well, and I started drinking, and I said, well, if they're going to accuse me now that I've been bad, I'll just bend it. And that's what I did.
While Coleman had testified that Tribble told him only he and his brother could bend badges, the practice spread throughout the department, with at least 3 other officers named as bending their colleagues' badges. One thing that each officer has denied was that badges were bent multiple times for multiple shootings, but conflicting accounts and a lawsuit by a former police captain suggest that some officers did have more than one bend on their badge. In the early morning hours of January 23, 2017, Officer Zachary Jacobson, badge number 639, and his partner, Officer Matt Samita, badge number 636, responded to reports of a fight at a house on Sacramento Street. Jacobson said he heard yelling and screaming and saw several people fighting on a second-story balcony, including 21-year-old Angel Ramos. Jacobson said he saw Ramos holding a large knife, so he shot and killed him. Ramos's family denied he had a knife, and even Samita testified he didn't see Ramos with the alleged knife.
Take over the breath, man. Relax, all right?
Is my cousin okay?
I don't know who your cousin is, bud. I don't know.
It's a young male.
I don't know, man. There's a lot of young, but I don't care.
In a report authored by then Sergeant Sanjay Ramraka, the department found that Jacobson did not violate department policy. The Solano County District Attorney's Office cleared Jacobson of criminal charges the following year. Jacobson's badge was bent after the Ramos shooting, but there are conflicting accounts of who did it and why. According to Falloy, Jacobson told Giordano that Detective Terry Poyser, who wore badge number 522 before retiring in 2020, was the person who bent his badge. But Tribble testified that he saw Coleman bend Jacobson's badge at the Relay Club, an account that Coleman firmly denied.
Did you bend Zach Jacobson's badge in a bar in front of Kent Tribble?
No.
Did you bend Zach Jacobson's badge at all?
No.
Were you ever present when his badge was bent?
No.
Were you ever present?
Falloy alleges that Jacobson would soon bend another officer's badge. The night of February 13th, 2018, Officer Ryan McMahon, badge number 702, noticed 33-year-old Ronell Foster riding his bicycle without a light. McMahon chased Foster into a backyard on Carolina Street, where a brief struggle ensued, and McMahon shot Foster 7 times, including in the back of the head.
Vallejo 3.1, shots fired, 415 Carolina Street.
Falloy said in court on March 22nd that Jacobson bent McMahon's badge for him after he killed Foster. By the time McMahon turned in his badge a year later, he had 2 bent tips. Tribble testified that he had instructed officers who bent each other's badges not to tell anyone else about it because he feared that it could become an incentive for violence. But he called the notion that he could keep that from happening naive.
Hey, we don't discuss this because we don't want to try to want to earn this thing. We don't. That was a big concern. Believing that can actually occur is pretty naive and foolish, and in my personal opinion, reckless on my part.
By then, Judge Healy said, Officer Ryan McMahon was enthusiastically engaging in badge bending.
Have you had any discussions with Officer McMahon about badge bending?
No, sir.
So if he was engaging in this sort of thing enthusiastically, you have no idea of what might have caused him to learn this practice?
Correct. Well,
The Vallejo Police Department finally clamped down on the practice after the shooting of Willie McCoy on February 9th, 2019.
All right, go inside.
6 officers fired 55 times into a silver Mercedes parked in a Taco Bell drive-thru where McCoy was unresponsive, allegedly with a gun on his lap. McMahon arrived just as officers began shooting and fired one round from behind Officer Brian Glick, badge number 672. McMahon was later fired for putting Glick's life in danger. Judge Healy told Kent Tribble in court that McMahon had gone off the rails.
But you had no direct, because that seems exactly right, since he went off the rails in a couple different ways. You had no knowledge, you didn't get his badge,
I did not
discuss with him the meaning of such a thing?
I did not.
All right, so you recognize how this thing can evolve.
Shortly after the McCoy shooting, the Vallejo Police Department became aware that McMahon had added a plate to his gun with the words Veritas and Aquitas, meaning truth and justice, a reference to the 1999 film Boondock Saints, where 2 brothers engage in vigilante justice.
Thy command. So we shall flow ever forth to thee, and teeming with souls shall it ever be. In nomine Patri, et Filii, Spiritus Sancti.
As the alterations to his gun were investigated, McMahon turned in his badge with a bent tip. A captain took it to then Police Chief Andrew Badu, badge number 677, who said that he would handle it. According to Joe Alio, badge number 738, who was an interim assistant chief when the scandal became public. But Badu had already heard of badge bending by then. Alio wrote in an email to a PR firm that said Badu told a sergeant in internal affairs about it, but no internal affairs case was ever opened. In 2020, Captain John Whitney, badge number 554, filed a wrongful termination lawsuit alleging he was the captain who received McMahon's badge, and he saw not 1, but 2 bent tips. Here's Whitney in an interview with ABC7's Melanie Woodrow from December 2020.
The internal affairs sergeant had discovered that his badge was not sitting flush on the table and brought it to my attention and Chief Badu's attention. And what we discovered is that the 2 points on the badge had been bent.
McMahon told Whitney those bends, quote, signified the 2 people he had killed in the line of duty, according to Whitney's lawsuit. That lawsuit further alleges Whitney ordered all department supervisors to inspect officers' uniforms and collect bent badges. They allegedly found about 10 badges with bent tips.
Chief Andrew Badu told me to get those badges returned to the officers and have them all repair them themselves and pay for the repairs themselves. He was afraid that if the badges had been returned to the badge repair company or the badge making company, that it would generate a bill that finance would see, and there'd be questions about why so many badges had to be repaired.
Whitney's lawsuit says that he brought his concerns to then City Manager Greg Nyoff, then City Attorney Claudia Quintana, and then Mayor Bob Sampayan, a retired Vallejo police sergeant who used to wear badge number 418. Still, there was no investigation. Instead, Badu moved to fire Whitney on August 26, 2019. In his testimony, Kent Tribble said he bent people's badges because he thought he was helping them as they were going through difficult ordeals.
Because these things are really hard on people, on all sides of them. And a lot of times, you know, as a guy that's been through it, you want to help another guy or gal get through it. Or let them know that there's at least someone there.
But in retrospect, Tribble said he realized the harm that it was bound to cause.
I can look back and see that I was very myopic in some of the things that I was doing, because here I'm thinking I'm helping people. I'm not paying attention to the bigger picture of the kind of exposure I'm giving not only myself but them and the department with what I'm thinking is doing a good thing. So I think as I
And for that, he told Judge Healy he was sorry.
Number one, created a liability for not only myself, my coworkers in the department, for the perception. And number two, I mean, there's already a tenuous public trust of the police, and my behavior did not do anything to help that. And for that, I'm sincerely sorry.
Whitney went public with allegations of badge bending in July 2020. Newly sworn in Police Chief Shawnee Williams, badge number 725, swiftly confirmed the practice and promised a thorough outside investigation by former Sonoma County Sheriff Rob Giordano. Here's Williams addressing badge bending in an interview with CNN's W. Kamau Bell that aired last May.
You know, I don't have to tell you, Vallejo's been through a lot. One of the things that has stuck with me is the badge bending story that came out.
I can just say that that matter is under investigation. Anyone who celebrates the killing of a human being by bending the badge is not fit to wear our patch.
Giordano finished his report more than a year after badge bending became public knowledge. So far, the report and its findings have been tightly guarded secrets, and the department has not disclosed taking any disciplinary action in response to it. Giordano's report is roughly 150 pages long and contains numerous interviews with officers. After reviewing it, Judge Healy questioned the value of Giordano's investigation.
That there's a universe of several things. One, there's probably many dozens of pages of people denying any knowledge of this thing and just saying it's stupid. There's probably 20 different officers who that's the totality of their statement. And then what there is a lot of discussion, pages and pages of discussion of management.
Judge Healy said the report characterizes some of the officers involved as victims because Kent Tribble bent their badges against their will. But Healy said that conclusion was, quote, insane because none of the officers reported the behavior. Still, some of the officers, like Josh Coleman, reiterated those feelings on the witness stand.
If I can. Okay, go ahead.
I'm really fighting to control my emotions about this whole thing because I did not ask for this to happen to me the first time, and I didn't create this circumstance to be here in court talking about this today. So this is very upsetting for me to sit here and talk about something, especially if there are falsehoods being attributed to me and my involvement in this.
When Deputy Public Defender Nick Falloy had Giordano on the stand, he repeatedly questioned him about how thorough his investigation was, showing where he missed key opportunities to find information about badge bending in the Vallejo Police Department that officers might not have otherwise readily shared.
Did you review the emails and invoices at the Vallejo Police Department for badges for prior years to see if badges had been fixed, replaced in a manner that would be suspicious or suggest?
No.
No, you did not?
Not at the Vallejo Police Department.
And was there a reason you did not do that?
Well, I have to explain, we did it a different direction. We went to the badge company.
Giordano said he didn't request the records from the badge manufacturer, the Ed Jones Company in Berkeley, because he thought it was unlikely an officer would ask his department to fix a bent badge.
Okay. And so just to clarify your earlier answers, you've never seen an invoice from the Ed Jones Company. You've never seen an example of an invoice from the Ed Jones Company in the Vallejo Police Department?
I have not.
Okay.
Giordano also testified that his investigation didn't include reviewing hundreds of pages of emails between the badge maker and Vallejo Police.
But if I ask you, have you reviewed like hundreds of emails between the Ed Jones Company and Vallejo Police Department?
No.
No.
Following Giordano's recent testimony, Judge Healy said he didn't think much of his investigation.
I don't find his investigation to be thorough. I don't find his investigation designed to serve the needs of the community. It feels to me like he was seeking to thread some needle to satisfy various entities in a way that minimized blowback.
Falloy was even more critical of Giordano's investigation.
This investigation is a limitation of liability exercise done by a guy who is a professional, apologist and cover-up artist for police misconduct, which I have significant evidence from the past that Mr. Giordano is. That That is not something that should be afforded privilege. Like I said,
Ultimately, Floyd wanted Judge Healy to release Giordano's report to him and the public, as well as audio recordings of his interviews with officers.
I guarantee you that other officers mentioned these officers' names at some point. There's more information that's cross-cutting. I have a giant amount of information in my head about this stuff. I'm also going to put it to the court that, I don't just represent Mr. Milano being prosecuted by the Vallejo Police Department. This is an issue we're just going to keep dealing with over and over.
I understand that, and that's something different.
Right.
There are certain officers that I mentioned yesterday that when they come up, I know it's coming.
Judge Healy didn't rule to release the report or the recordings, saying he didn't think they were relevant necessarily to Milano's defense. But, as Judge Healy has said in his courtroom before, it's only a matter of time before the full truth comes out.
All right, thank you very much.
This has been a production of the Vallejo Sun. This episode was written and reported by Scott Morris and myself, Brian Kranz. We had help gathering audio from our colleague John Glidden. Together, we are the Vallejo Sun. To help support our work, consider subscribing to the Sun for as little as $50 a year. You can become a member by visiting vallejosun.com/membership. Thanks for listening.